Let's talk about all of this now with Robert Winder. He's author of a book called Bloody Foreigners, The Story of Immigration to Britain. And he's also a trustee of the Migration Museum Project. Good morning to you, Robert.
Good morning.
Good morning. Interesting choice of title for your job, summing up the attitude of a lot of people. But the polling seems to be quite clear that I think some 70% of Brits are horrified by the treatment of these immigrants. Totally here, totally arrived legally, every right to be here, but they've been caught up in what was supposed to be a crackdown on illegal immigration that appears to have gone horribly wrong. Why do you think it's gone wrong? Do you think it's incompetence by the Home Office, incompetence by politicians, or the fact they just didn't care until this was on the front pages of certain newspapers?
Well, I'm shocked, actually, that as many as 30% might think that this is in any sense a good idea. I mean, it's so shocking, such an embarrassing disgrace. And in terms of looking for good news, you're right. Good news is that this has kind of been brought to light in time to stop it. The idea that we're a country that's deporting people who came here when they were children 60 years ago, I think is rather amazing to most of us. In terms of why it's happened, I suppose having looked at the subject, it's always difficult, I think, that the subject of migration, which is just people living their lives, comes under the ambit of the Home Office all the time, which is really a law and order organisation whose idea of a solution to any problem is to put people in prison or an internment camp or deport them. And it's just not a very appropriate way of dealing with this, life and death issue. So it is very embarrassing. It's very damaging to the British brand overseas. It makes us look like a bungling country, a bit of a shambles, as well as one that dislikes foreigners. So it's tragic all round, except for the fact that there's been good journalism here and it's come to light and it's going to end. I mean, I believe Theresa May and Amber Rudd, I think their apologies were sincere. I don't suppose they, for a moment, dreamed that this was happening. But
well,
of course,
you say
when you do try and crack down, when you sort of have targets and try and crack down, you end up trapping in the pincers. You end up, trapping grandmothers and students and people who've been working in special needs for years.
Well, indeed. I mean, all credit to Amelia Gentleman, the journalist at The Guardian, who's been writing about this for some months now. But again, the Prime Minister was told about the case of a gentleman who was trying to get treatment for the NHS for his prostate cancer, who was told, well, we can't prove you're not an illegal immigrant, you haven't got your paperwork, even though you've been here decades, so you're going to have to pay. And she said, well, he'll have to pay. The government has been made aware of this. Surely, as more and more of these cases were coming forward, Home Office officials should have gone, hold on a minute. There's something going on here, or even when the decision was made in 1971 to say, look, to give absolute leave to remain in the country, to tell everybody you need to get paperwork to make sure, and issuing everyone with paperwork, and when the decision was made to have the crackdown on illegal immigrants and to require the amount of paperwork they now require for people to prove that they're here legally, that they should have seen. I mean, one of these bright sparks paid by taxpayers' money every day should have gone, hold on a minute, aren't there hundreds of thousands of people? I think 500,000 people who came over as a result of the Windrush generation in total, who might be affected by this. I mean, this is just some basic, joined-up, competent government, isn't it?
Well, it is, but I think you're right. I think it's so widespread, it's so systematic that it's more than a question of one or two heads must roll. I suppose that's my point. I mean, people love at a time like this. People keep their high horses permanently saddled for a moment like this, and they're out to get their enemies. But I do think this is obviously a large issue. Of course, it's one of the ironies here. It's one of the glories of life in Britain, is that you have been, up till now, able to live more or less a paperless life. If you didn't commit a crime, you could actually be born and die without really encountering the authorities in any way.
And we are quite unusual in that, though, because there's a lot of we say, well, people should have documentation to prove who they are and whether they've got a right to be in the country. And actually, in most very liberal Western European democracies, you are required to carry an identity card at all times. It's actually an offence not to have it with you.
Well, exactly. And I suspect that will be one of the repercussions of this, is that we will move closer towards the world of ID cards and papers and official documentation. One of the reasons that has made Britain very attractive to immigrants over the last 50 years has been that it's an easy country to come to and to get a job in and make your way in without needing forms and paperwork. I mean, as you say, elsewhere it is much more difficult. And I suspect that's a loophole that will sort of be closing from now on, which is also sad.
Well, again, although I mean, look, I absolutely want people who have a right to be here to be able to come make their life here and have a good life here and be treated equally, same rights as I have. But I also I'm very supportive of having a crackdown on illegal immigration and not saying, well, they're here now, let's just carry on. And I don't think you should be employing people who have no right to be here. I don't think you should be able to go and walk in and get free NHS care. I don't think you should be able to just sort of enroll your kids in school and be able to rent a home if you've got no right to be here. But if the net has been cast in such a way as it is bringing in people who are completely and utterly every right to be here, then obviously something has gone wrong. But there's also an issue of this. I mean, this isn't just about the people who've arrived from the Caribbean. There's a big concern that this is going to affect the 3 million EU citizens who now. Now, there's a lot of talk about their status being uncertain. I have 100% certainty that EU citizens who are already here, in fact, anyone who's arriving up to end of 2020, realistically, they're going to have the same rights as Britons. And I don't think anyone's realistically on any side of the political debate is any doubt of that. But the question is, of course, how they will prove that status in years to come, in the same way as these Caribbean immigrants have had that problem.
Well, and also, you're right, this is in a way the tip of the iceberg, because I think the number here is involved is they think 57,000 of the 500,000 people who came before 1971. They think there are probably 50,000 who haven't got the right papers. So they're the ones in focus of this story. But you're right, the 3 million or more EU citizens here, who I think now are the largest ethnic minority in Britain, and where they don't often sort of talked about in that way.
Well, they're not an ethnic minority, are they? That's ridiculous.
No, but they're not. But they don't. I mean, many ethnic minorities are also not ethnic minorities. They're just lumped together for convenience, like that. But anyway, they're not really a body with representation, I suppose, is what I mean.
Yeah.
But their predicament, I agree with you. It will likely result in the situation you described, that everything will in a way be fine. But along the way, I suspect, sadly, there'll be many stories like this. There'll be someone, who's been working for the RAF for 35 years who's threatened with deportation.
Yeah, but again,
we're a scandal. So there'll just be repeated episodes on the kind of pinch line.
Yes, and we're going to be exactly the same situation as some of these Caribbean immigrants have been in, where sort of saying, asked to prove, well, have you been here all this time? Well, yes, you've been taking my tax and national insurance payments all this time. So yes, there's my proof. And you, the government, have got the proof. Oh yes, and you also have my landing card for when I arrived. But no, Theresa May, when she was at the Home Office, decided to destroy them, which is something she may live to through the day of. Rupert Winder, lovely to speak to you. Thank you so much. He's author of a book. I apologise for the title, but I think it really does tell you the attitude, bloody foreigners, the story of immigration to Britain. He's also a trustee of the Migration Museum Project.